Electric vehicles are the future of the automotive world. But even though the numbers of drivers switching to electric grows exponentially year on year, there are still people and industries out there that want to see the technology fail. And with that comes the birth of the EV myths. As a championship that plays part in pioneering electric vehicle development, we know a thing or two about electric cars. So time to debunk 5 common myths. Myth number 1, electric cars create more emissions than fossil fuel powered cars. The 2 main arguments that build up this claim revolve around the emissions created during the production of electric cars and the source of the power used to charge them. So let's start by looking at the life cycle of both types of cars. It's true that electric car batteries require more energy to be produced than a combustion engine, but with more and more manufacturers moving to CO2 neutral plants powered by renewable energy, production emissions are only going to be declining. And any excess energy or emissions that may be produced in that manufacturing process of electric cars is cancelled out in no time at all by the lack of exhaust emissions as soon as that car is on the road. On average, long-range EVs can make up for those production emissions in just 18 months, and 6 months for smaller, shorter-range EVs, and significantly less if the energy used to charge is from renewable sources, something that the majority of the world is on the way to adopting. A recent study showed that in 95% of the world, driving an electric car is better for the environment than a fossil fuel-powered car. The only exception being countries that still rely on coal to produce the majority of their energy. But coal use continues to decline, whereas renewable sources like wind and solar are only on the rise. So, if you own an EV like a Nissan Leaf or even something as powerful as a Porsche Taycan, it gets cleaner to run every day without us having to do a thing. In the EU, over a vehicle's life cycle, EV emissions are between 70 to 30% lower than that of petrol and diesel cars. However, as the fossil fuels used in EU energy decreases, as it's predicted to, the life cycle emissions of an EV could be reduced by more than 70% by 2050. The same study projects that by then, every second car on the streets of the world could be electric, something that would reduce global CO2 emissions by up to 1.5 gigatons per year, equivalent to the current total CO2 emissions of Russia. So then we get to the end of the vehicle's life. Both car types require large amounts of energy to dispose of. However, electric car batteries can be repurposed for other non-automotive uses like residential and commercial electrical storage. Manufacturers are also investing big and developing ways to make the materials inside recyclable for new batteries, meaning the CO2 emission reduction can continue long after the car is off the road. Myth number 2, they're slow and sluggish to drive. A myth clearly invented by someone who's never driven an electric car and beaten a 2-litre turbo off the line in a Renault Zoe. If there's one thing electric cars have in common, it's that the instant torque puts an instant smile on your face every time you pull away from traffic lights. And if we're looking at speed and acceleration, the fastest accelerating electric family car, a Tesla Model S, can accelerate from 0 to 100 km per hour quicker than a Lamborghini Aventador, and without any emissions. And if you want a like-for-like comparison, Jaguar's I-Pace is faster to 100 km per hour than its V6 supercharged F-Type sibling. Myth number 2, well and truly debunked. Myth number 3, they're too expensive to buy. Electric cars are still a relatively emerging market on a global scale, and therefore the cost price of batteries and other technology are higher than that of a century-old industry. But if you compare like for like on performance and the equipment that comes as standard, the gap begins to bridge very quickly. In the UK and other countries in Europe, electric cars qualify for a government grant or reduction in tax. That's worth £3,500 in the UK. Not to mention they cost significantly less to drive than combustion-powered cars, can be charged at home, and when it comes to time to sell them, only one is going to hold its value. The car that can run on clean energy and fits with the world emission targets, and not the car that requires increasingly more redundant fuel and is more expensive to run. Myth number 4, they don't have enough range. The EV world is growing at a rapid pace, and that includes battery and charging technology. 5 years ago, you'd struggle to drive close to 100 miles on a single charge. In 2020, we have cars with a range of 300 and 350 plus miles, and even smaller city cars with 100 to 200 miles. More than enough for most journeys, considering the UK average is 30 miles of driving a day. For most journeys, you're unlikely to have to take the time out of the drive to go to a specific station to charge or refuel. Being able to charge at home allows you to treat your car charging in the same way you would with your phone. And if you charge it at night, you can benefit from cheaper electricity tariffs. Busting two myths in one there, as another common criticism is that there aren't enough public chargers. But with a charger at home, at the office, or privately owned chargers in restaurants, car parks, hotels, and so on, for most average daily usage, you're unlikely to need public chargers. And for the longer journeys across the country, there are now more than 30,000 charge points across the UK in over 11,000 locations. That's more public places to charge than petrol stations, and with around 10,000 charge points added in 2019 alone. And that number is only going one way: up. Finally, myth number 5, the battery will need to be replaced too quickly. Most manufacturers guarantee the performance of a battery for at least 5 years, so align that with the average ownership of a car being only 3 years and you have less to worry about. But of course, you may want or need the car to last longer than that. So let's take a look at the numbers after 100,000 miles. Some EV data suggests that mileage could bring with it a 10 to 20% loss in battery capacity. But consider this: you do the same number of miles in a petrol or diesel, and depending on how you've driven it, which the same goes for an electric vehicle, the engine could be tired or completely knackered. What would you do? Pay to have it rebuilt back to factory standard, or just keep using it with a slightly lowered performance or efficiency? Because of the way they're built and how battery cells can be replaced individually, replacing the battery in an electric vehicle is relatively simple and affordable too. For example, Nissan quote a 24 kilowatt-hour replacement Leaf battery at just over £4,000, minus £1,000 for them getting to reuse your used battery. And it's half the price if you're happy with a reconditioned battery. And who doesn't love recycling? So there we have it, 5 common myths about electric cars debunked. So now we can all go forth and embrace the electric future, because like it or not, it's happening.